All right, great. Hey, thank you everybody for attending. I appreciate that. I am Dwayne Florenzie with the Office of Commercial and Economic Analysis, and also called OCEA, which has been, this office under the Secretary of the Air Force was created about 3 years ago. So with the understanding that industry, the economy, and defense are all very tightly related. And so I consider my role here in related to 5G as promote and protect. How do we promote 5G as an opportunity? And then also how do we do it, though, in a careful, protected way. And so our organization also is involved in assessing how to mitigate commercial and economic risks that could impact our defense capabilities. So there's lots of misunderstanding related to what 5G is and what its implications are. And so that's what I really want to try to go through today is what is 5G, how is it going to impact our society as well as our Defense Department and the Air Force, and then what are the innovation opportunities, especially with many of you coming from companies where you want to promote a new solution. I'd like to kind of expand your eyes or your understanding about what 5G is, because it really, it's a road to innovation in many different areas. So, these are areas that even the Air Force is trying to understand now too. So it's a way that you can help shape that direction. So I'm going to move to the next slide here. Let's make sure I figure out how to do that. Okay, I see where I got to do that. Okay, so for those who can see it, I have a picture here of cars trying to talk to each other. And what we have today is you have like a Tesla that operates like, I call it a bubble. Basically, it's got its radar around the car, but the cars aren't necessarily talking. That's all it is. It's a bubble. But with 5G, the cars will be able to talk to each other. They'll be also getting information from the lamppost in terms of traffic conditions ahead, maybe weather information. If it's in a smart city, it also could have video feeds to alert them to pedestrians coming close to the roads. And what makes 5G unique is that it's also the same timing as the emergence of artificial intelligence. So now there's the opportunity to capture all that data, process it, and then make real-time decisions. So that's where I say 5G is not just mobility, not just moving around, not just what we have with 4G, but it's the convergence of mobility with the Internet of Things and with low latency and with the emergence of artificial intelligence. Okay, and then if you look back at each generation of mobile communications, each of them has had a region that has dominated or been the one to the lead. In 2G GSM, Europe was the leader. For 3G, Japan led with some internet-type capabilities that they were able to provide first to market. And then with 4G, the U.S. has been the dominant lead. And this has had a huge impact on our innovation as well as our economy. The U.S. has led with connecting social, video, music through mobility in terms of 4G or LTE. And so we see the move towards 5G will have a huge impact on our innovation capabilities as well as our economy. And so that's another reason why 5G is so important for us to take the leadership that we have now with 4G and move it into 5G and the new applications that will come along with it. So the question I get asked most often is, so is 5G here or is it not here yet? And the answer really is both. Right now we have what is really an extension of 4G, and that's what most people think 5G is only going to be, just an extension of 4G, higher data speed. But and that is true. That is what's available now. That's what the U.S. operators are rolling out. That's what Korea has rolled out nationwide. And that in itself is actually pretty significant. Korea, the uptake on 5G in Korea has been faster than any technology ever in the world. And all it really is doing is equipping them with higher speed broadband. So that means faster video downloads and augmented reality, virtual reality gaming type things. And that in itself has caused a significant uptake. But it's these other two areas of 5G that I think are really transformational. And the standards of these next two areas aren't even yet completed until the summer of this year. And that is the connection to everything. That's the Internet of Things. So there'll be a massive amount of sensors and devices that will be able to be connected because of 5G. And then there's the almost no delay time or low latency, which enables mission-critical applications where there's no delay, real-time capabilities. And we have never had all of these capabilities before in any kind of technology. And that's where we're going to see dramatic transformation because of 5G. So 5G is going to connect to everything. And here on the left, you see the city and how all different aspects of our technology are being connected. Before, it's been a phone or internet. In the future, it'll be our infrastructure. It'll be our power grids. It'll be the critical aspects of what runs a city or a country. And so that's really significant. In the past, if I'm jumping ahead to the concept of security, in the past, we're concerned about somebody hearing our voice communications or capturing our internet-connected data. But with 5G, this is completely different. Now we're giving access to our critical infrastructure, to our power grids, to our factory data and operations. And nobody's ever had that readily available access into things that are so central. And I give you an example here on the right of the petroleum end-to-end process monitoring automation, where currently there are, each node has different kind of connections, but what 5G will enable will be ubiquitous connectivity in a way that we haven't had that in the past. And so that creates a wonderful opportunity in being able to manage all that information and process it in real time, but it also creates that vulnerability. So we need to do it in a secure and proper way so that we are not turning over our treasures in terms of the information and the capabilities and access to that information. Let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so all this slide is really saying is that 5G is just starting and it's still going to come for a while. And so that's, again, where part of the confusion is 5G here yet or not? Well, again, all we really have are existing use cases where we're just building on what 4G had. Additionally, a lot of these capabilities that we'll have in 5G are available today in factories and even in some aspects of automotive and in cities. But it's that connectivity and capabilities and bringing them all together that we'll get, especially with those two additional kind of transformational aspects of 5G. And so the new use cases are really 5 to 10 years from now. And if you look at LTE 4G, LTE came out about 10 years ago, and it is only now reaching everything that was promised 10 years ago. But it is achieving all those things that were promised 10 years ago. And I foresee something similar with 5G, where it's going to take 5 to 10 years before we see maturity and it's really coming together. But now is the time when the decisions are being made and design and anticipation of the different type of applications and the important innovations that will prepare us to be there when we get to that full capability. To me, this is the most important slide of the whole deck. Everybody's been focusing in on the center section, which is basically the basic infrastructure for mobile communications. That's the core network, the access network, the radio, connecting to devices, and then backed up by the cloud. This is important, very important. It is the foundation for 5G, but this is commodity-based. This is where we've been operating for years now, and this is a solid foundation. And there are valid and very capable vendors that are going to provide equipment in this area. My biggest concern is all of these bubbles around it, all the different advanced technologies that is where we're going to see real innovation, real transformation to our society. And that's where so much of our attention and invention needs to be. And so often I see we're focused looking back about what we've done in the past in terms of the basic infrastructure, but the real transformation is going to come in these other areas here in terms of augmented reality, virtual reality, drones, autonomous vehicles, robotics, especially as it relates to factories and all. And so all of these areas, again, highlighting to you who are doing the innovations, these are areas that we want to tap into and that I think you want to point out even to the Air Force and DoD people that you're dealing with. These are the connections back to make with what makes 5G really attractive and impacting our society and defense departments. So 5G is not too far in the future, even for the aspects that I mentioned where the standards are coming available this summer. Even jumping ahead of when the standards are complete, we see Mercedes-Benz developing a 5G factory in Germany. And they have over 300 driverless vehicles in the production line. And this gives them flexibility to move the production line. Not everything is bolted down and are wired. And so it gives them the opportunity to customize, insert different aspects into the assembly line. This is very significant in terms of speeding up manufacturing, the ability to get real-time information that 5G provides. So it provides ubiquitous connectivity, automation, data management in terms of being able to take the data and analyze it, visualize it, and then additionally there's what they're implementing is a digital twin, which is a virtual simulation of the production processes so that they can anticipate issues ahead, do predictive maintenance and such. So I think this is very transformational. And one more point on this is I think this could be one of the best applications in the near future because we're not waiting on government regulations to say that you can put 5G on the lamppost and use autonomous vehicles. This is something that a company can do today because they have control of their own factory. They can set the base stations up in their factory. They can even keep it as a private network. And so this is something that can happen today and improve efficiency and productivity immediately. All right, so let's look at the implications for the military. And again, this is very high level, but I'm throwing this slide out there so that you, again, are considering how do you apply your product to the military? And for the military, government people, how can we incorporate 5G in new, innovative ways that we haven't thought of before? The greatest innovations, I think, are 5G, haven't even been thought of yet. And so my purpose behind this slide is really just to start getting you thinking about what we could envision with 5G, but then I'd like you to think, what have we not envisioned yet where we can start bringing 5G into those things? So the first here is base operations. So if you think about it, a military base is like a city. So really this is smart city applications in terms of setting up communications, transportation, the power on the base and improving efficiency, logistics, moving things around, healthcare, and then security, being able to have surveillance cameras and security around the base, and safety and emergency operations. All of these things could be influenced by 5G connectivity. Next is the major commands operation. And that's I think will take a lot of creativity, because I think there's a lot of things here that we haven't thought of. But how it might be able to influence our combat operations, whatever levels of refueling, flight line operations, which the Air Force is already investigating, especially as it relates to maintenance, and then unmanned robotics, especially in dangerous environments. And then related to that, but I think a different area, is battlefield and airspace operations. And that would be like forward command and control, and even kind of ad hoc networks where you could actually use drones as a mobile network, moving mobile base stations around. And then also the concept of remote medical treatments, which is very important for the military. Spectrum use is my next point here, and how to work with mobile operators. That's being investigated in some of the DoD test beds that I'll mention in a moment. That's very important. Basically, I'll mention it now. With spectrum, there's low band, mid band, high band. Low band is what has been traditionally used on the mobile networks. High band is quite vacant, and so there's opportunity to really have large broadband capability there, but it's much localized. Mid-band is somewhere in between. And I see what's happening right now is we're trying to do more with mid-band to make that available. And I see the FTC and industry and DoD working together to try to figure out where things can be freed up, and with DoD where things can be shared together. And so moving in those directions. So, and the relationship here with sensor strategy and design. Let me jump to this triangle here that I put on the right. Information technology, the telecom industry in the bottom corner, is what has traditionally been the player involved in deploying mobile networks. But now that we're getting into factories, we're getting into utilities, and if we have the Internet of Things, we're also dealing with operational technology that these industries play with. So these are very different cultures, very different types of security levels, and that's going to be a challenge to bring them together because the standards are different, the whole way of operating is different. But I think that will eventually be worked out because financial incentives of these two industries needing to work together to drive forward many of these applications. I think the challenging area is the top one here, and that's the defense industry, defense communications. How do we bring the defense industry into this mix? Because we're going to need to have the defense industry adopt some aspects of 5G as well and to all play together in order to get the maximum capabilities that will be available with 5G. So that's going to be one that's going to need to be worked out over these next years. And again, I'm bringing up all these different challenges. 5G is complex in many different ways, but with complexity comes opportunity. And again, I think this is an opportunity for companies to step in and help DoD with many of these areas. Next is how to integrate operations in other countries. So our military obviously moves and operates in different countries. We're going to have to work out relationships with those countries in terms of communication networks and how we can work closely together. Integrating into manufacturing, acquisition, sustaining processes, this is critical. I think there's so much opportunity there, and it will make major improvements related to efficiency and digitization. And the next one, augmented reality, virtual reality, is already being incorporated into training. And with 5G, there'll be a need to investigate, okay, how do we take the advantage of mobility to play into that, to use it more on-the-go type of training or even in testing and assessments. I'll mention in a moment here about bases that we're already trying to move forward with for 5G. And then I already mentioned that we need to establish security assurances across the board. So security is a huge area that is going to take a lot of work. Personally, I think the biggest area that we need to be concerned about is the Internet of Things and devices, because that has not traditionally been to the level of security capabilities that I think we're going to need once we get into 5G, and again, once we get connecting out of a private network into a 5G network as it relates to, say, factories and critical infrastructure. Okay, so the last two slides I have here are about what is the Air Force and DoD doing related to digitization. And so I've only come back to the Air Force in the last year. I came from industry. I previously was with Cisco and then GE Digital and also Lucent and Alcatel-Lucent, which is now Nokia. So I've been heavily involved in the mobile communications. And I've been very impressed coming back to the Air Force and DoD and seeing how they're really trying to move aggressively in terms of integrating advanced technologies and even just technology into the bases and trying to move forward in that area. And so the CIO organization, in cooperation, in conjunction with civil engineering and AQ, has been doing a number of different modernizations on the bases. But the one I want to focus on this slide is the base network infrastructure. And so about 10 bases are almost finished with deploying 4G onto the bases. Most of these bases are in the southeast part of the United States. And Air Force went into kind of bundled these all together, and those are being deployed, and they'll eventually be upgraded to 5G. The next group of 17 bases, mainly in the northwest part of the United States, the decision on a vendor or operator will be made pretty soon, at least by this summer, and those 17 bases will then be deployed with 4G and then eventually 5G. These will be places that will be opportunities where we can maybe set up cyber opportunities, testing, especially as it relates to base operations or 5G or some type of the digitization or applications that I've been talking about. So these are things for you to consider. And then the DoD is doing something that I don't believe any other countries in the world are doing in terms of having the Defense Department helping drive industry, drive use cases. And each service was able to choose a base. And we have four bases that are being set up now for 5G. Actually, the request for proposal is coming out this week, and so by this summer we should start seeing implementation and vendors being decided. Hill Air Force Base is the Air Force Base where we're going to test spectrum sharing. Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington is focused on training using augmented reality and virtual reality. That was chosen by the Army. Then we have Naval Base San Diego and Coronado that are going to be doing smart depot warehousing logistics support. And the Marine Base in Albany, Georgia is going to be doing similar. And so we're going to see these 4 different test beds as the initial rollout and being able to put it into action what 5G can do. And this year, Congress and their NDAA chose Nellis Air Force Base as an additional base. And there's a team at Nellis Air Force Base today, as we speak, working with the team there to identify the use cases and how they're going to implement that. And more bases and use cases will be rolled out on an ongoing basis. And these efforts are being led by the Office of Undersecretary of Defense in Research and Engineering, Dr. Joe Evans. So these are the areas where I see the Air Force and DoD moving, and ones that I think you want to get on board with. And again, looking at 5G not as a narrow, just a mobile network, but much broader in terms of the applications, in terms of the innovation and the capabilities that it will deliver. And so I am available now for questions if we have a couple more minutes here, and I will see how we do that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dwayne. So we do have a question in the Q&A. I'm not sure if you're able to see it. I'm happy to read it if not.
I had questions up here before, but I don't see it now. No, please go ahead.
Okay, no worries. So we have a question from Sangat Rowley. Security is critical for 5G. Is
Right.
DoD accepting the 3GPP 5G security standards, or is it looking for enhanced security, especially for military applications?
Okay, so yeah, security is a big topic, a huge topic, and one that needs a lot of attention. So 5G security, because of the 3GPP standards and all, is actually greatly enhanced from 4G. So we're going to see a lot of huge improvements on encryption and many different areas that we have over 4G. So the industry is moving forward to try to improve that. Now, you're also still going to have the legacy equipment. So we're still going to have to deal with security issues from the past as well. And then on top of that, as I mentioned, we're getting into the Internet of Things. And so the standards are lacking, I believe, related to security on the Internet of Things, on those kind of devices. So that's another area that's going to take a lot of attention. And again, we do have industry working on that. Those that are going to be deploying it for commercial purposes will be able to help us on the defense side. But at the same time, obviously, security is very important. And so developing a zero trust network where we have multi-level security and test it out on some of these bases, I think is going to be really important. And again, as you know, realistically speaking, the Air Force or the DoD is a little bit risk averse, and rightly so. And so I think testing it out and proving it is going to be critical to give assurances to those who are making decisions to bring 5G onto the bases and into critical operations.
Awesome. Got another question here from Josh Pfeiffer, and it is, do military bases, there's two questions, two-parter. Do military bases stand up their own cellular infrastructure, or do they work with the carriers? And second, what 5G frequencies can we expect military bases to have in the next 2 to 4 years?
Okay. So as I understand it, traditionally, a lot of the operators, the mobile operators, AT&T, Verizon, have been operating outside of the base. And there are ways that they can have an agreement, but it's a relatively short-term agreement. What the team that I'm working with from the CIO office here in the Air Force has done in the last year is to entice the operators onto the bases and give them a longer-term agreement so that they can make the commitment and use their own funds and resources in order to enable that. So that's why I think we're going to see over this next year or two many more bases adopting 4G and 5G mobile communications capabilities on the bases. And the second question, in terms of spectrum, they will be adding then, the mobile operators will bring on the spectrum that they have. So it will be existing spectrum that will be used there on the bases.
Can you elaborate on that? We had another question from Danny Ferguson about spectrum sharing. Can you explain to us kind of what that is and what that looks like?
Okay, yeah, that's a very, you're right, it's a big topic right now and gaining a lot of attention. And the reason is because there's a push to open up more spectrum in the mid-band area. And so there's the FCC is moving forward on opening up spectrum in what they call the C-band. That's the upper part of the mid-band. And then that's just last week, they want to move forward with doing that. There's lots of debate on Congress related to that. There's a kind of middle part of the mid-band, which is CBRS, which is a type of sharing already that's going on. And that is moving forward. And then there's a lower part of the mid-band, which is dominated really by the DoD. And so what's happening in this test bed at Hill Air Force Base in Utah is going to be an effort to prove in the sharing of that spectrum with commercial spectrum. And so that will be to try to be able to use that spectrum in a sharing environment. That's the high level of where, and a simplistic kind of view of where I see the U.S. trying to open up more of that mid-band spectrum. Additionally, I'll point out at 2.5 gigahertz, Sprint has a significant amount of spectrum. And then there's also some spectrum around the 6 area that's also being worked out for Wi-Fi and other type of related 5G applications. So it's a pretty complex area there. But from my point of view, I see each group working its ways toward that. But obviously there's many different interests and company interests and industry interests there that are debating aspects of how it's actually implemented.
Awesome. Thanks, Dwayne. I think we have time for just one more question. We've got a question here from Paul Pazandak. He says, if we have relevant TRL9 communications technologies with software-defined security capabilities, how can we get involved in any of these efforts?
All right. One more time. Can you just, what kind of capabilities?
TRL9, Technology Readiness Level 9, communications technologies with software-defined security capabilities. How can we get involved?
So I'm not familiar. That's one of the disadvantages of coming in from the outside in an industry back to Air Force. I'm not familiar with those capabilities yet. I think for most of the base type operations and security, I would say the CIO office is driving that. So it would be the Air Force CIO office that would be welcome those kind of inputs in assessing a lot of security aspects.
Gotcha. And then one last question that just came in from Chastity Wright. She says, have you all started a test for providing security in 5G environments when there is no connectivity? And the example is something like Hurricane Michael.
So I think that is a great area that needs to be worked on, and there's a capability of a mobile ad hoc network already, not with 5G yet, but it's already where you can actually put base stations on drones and move them. You can either do it on drones or cables and make it static, but those are kind of things that I think can be moved in quickly into environments like that to substitute, or especially again even in combat situations where we have a mobile forward motion, and then we'll be able to do that. So these are all the kind of ideas that I really think we should be thinking about and being creative with. And you're right. Actually, the situations around us help foster that way of thinking in terms of hurricanes, and then even this virus situation is creating lots of different ideas about how we can do things remotely and in dangerous environments.
Okay, awesome. I'm being told that we actually do have 5 more minutes. So, Dwayne, if you've got time for one more question, we've got another in the chat room there. All
right, very good. I'm happy to.
Okay, cool. So from Bob Daniels, we have the question, how much support do you see for the millimeter wave bands 24, 28, and 39 gigahertz within the DoD?
Okay, so this is the high band that we're talking about. And I think the high band is going to be a very important part of the 5G network because it's going to provide the low latency capabilities and mission critical applications where things can be turned around quickly, real-time capabilities. So as I mentioned before, whether it's DoD or actually commercial, we're going to need to have each aspect of that, the broad spectrum of low band, mid band, and high band are all going to be necessary. So I think it's very important. And I'll make another comment on that. So the U.S. market, even though people are complaining about the mid-band situation in the U.S. is ahead of the world in terms of this high-band area, which will be important and very vital. And so that's one that I think you're going to see a lot of capitalized on here in the U.S.
All right. Another question here from Sangat Rowley. will military be deploying private 5G networks? If so, if yes, are they looking for operators to deploy those and manage them? And what spectrums will be used for private 5G networks?
And that's a great question that needs to be investigated. I don't know what the status of that is at this stage, but it's definitely the type of questions that we should be asking.
All right, awesome. There is one more question. I hope this is a real question, but if Sassidy's asking, are there any talks about using quantum entanglement?
Well, we all know, quantum is a very important technology, and I even included it again as one of my bubbles on the advanced technology that's going to relate to it. And so I think quantum definitely should be investigated. Obviously, it's still a ways away, but my whole point here too in this presentation is a lot of these opportunities and applications are still years away. But today is when we need to start doing the investigation about it, considering it, and be thinking forward-looking. And so I don't have any concrete ways to apply quantum to this yet, but I think that's definitely another one of those kind of questions, innovative questions that should be asked.
All right, very good. Well, I think that's all the time that we have, but this has been a really great presentation, Dwayne. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you to all of our observers and folks asking questions. Really awesome to have such a great conversation.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to spend with me. Appreciate it.